Hi, welcome to part 3 of the session on Oracle functions. My name is KD. I'm part of the product team in Oracle Cloud Infrastructure. If you have not seen the first two parts, it would be useful for you to watch those sessions first or those parts first. We looked at what is serverless computing category of cloud computing. We looked at functions as a service and how it's useful. We talked about Oracle functions and why do we need it and some of its key features. We talked about how it's based on the open source FN project and you can run it anywhere, whether on your laptop, in your data centers, on Oracle Cloud, or actually in any other cloud as well. We looked at the overview of how a function can be deployed and then invoked. We looked at the function triggers, points, and how it's integrated in the OCI ecosystem. We discussed the function development kits and the 5 languages that are first-class citizens, but you can use any languages as long as you can create a Docker container. You can run it with functions. We looked at the core concepts of what applications are, what actual functions are, and we talked about invoking the functions, deploying the file, after deploying, invoke the function, and how you can trigger these functions in the Oracle Function Service. We looked at the IAM policies you need. We went over the steps required to deploy a function and then what happens under the hood when you actually invoke a function. And finally, there are 4 different metrics that are shown to you via OCI console. We will start this session by looking at some of the use cases that you can execute using Oracle functions. And then we will also look at a demo. A succinct way of saying the potential use cases with functions is anywhere you need to run code in response to certain events happening is a good potential use case for using Oracle functions. This could be anywhere from real-time file and stream processing to DevOps and batch processing workloads, web, mobile, IoT backend, working in conjunction with API gateways is another set of use cases. And actually, for integrating event-driven cloud services, it can act as a glue between different cloud services. Rather than go into all these categories separately, I'm going to give you some examples. But let's start with the Glue Cloud Glue service acting as glue being the use case. In this case, if you have different kinds of cloud services, and these could be infrastructure platform and software as a service type of cloud offerings. These could be in a single cloud provider like OCI or actually across multiple cloud providers as well. Anytime you want these different systems, you can think of these as different systems to integrate with each other in an asynchronous manner, and this sort of decoupling and asynchronous mode of communication is important if you want to scale and work well in a distributed system. So anywhere you have a scenario like this, you can use functions, invoke your functions, for example, in response to certain events happening in one kind of cloud service, leading to a change or a response happening in a different kind of cloud service. And you can use different permutations and combinations of these services, as you can imagine. Another example use case would be to implement infrastructure event-driven architectures using Oracle functions. Anytime something happens, some resource in OCI changes, let's say an autonomous transaction processing database or a compute service coming up, or storage, block storage, or object storage, or notifications is another thing integrated very nicely with Oracle events or OCI events. And networking is networking resources can also trigger events. I encourage you to look at the events presentation. I've recorded a session on OCI event service, so you can learn more about this over there. But these events can actually, as we discussed earlier, these events can trigger functions, and these functions getting triggered can then act on these events happening. All right, so and examples would be uh, security operations kind of things. For example, you provision an OCI compute instance. When this instance is provisioned, that would trigger an event, and that event would trigger a function, and that function would have the code that would be able to uh, go into your compute instance and or into your OCI environment and check if the instance complies with security policies or not, and if not, it can take action like even terminating the instance. You can do network security analysis kind of use cases. In this case, you have your network access logs in an object store bucket. When data is put in there, that can trigger a function. This function uh, can now trigger a function. This function can now take the logs in the object storage bucket and then process them or send them to an analysis tool. Or, for example, you can actually integrate a third-party solution like Splunk, so that these logs are sent into Splunk, or you could use any other analysis tool as well. The key thing here is there is no developer intervention. This is all automated. You don't have to babysit this. This is happening uh, on the basis of an event happening, and the function is doing the integration and some pre-processing if you want it. Another example that I want to talk about is, again, automation is a key part or a key point here. In this example, we have autonomous transaction processing database instance coming up in OCI, and this creation, this event of creating the instance triggers OCI events, and OCI events you are able to filter on these state changes in the resources and write rules, and the rules could invoke an action, and these actions could be triggering a function in Oracle functions, and this function can do a few things. It can, for example, run scripts to create schemas or import data into your ATP instance. You can also act on this event to send notifications to your developers by email. So this is another example. And now let me give you a demo of the Oracle Functions Service in action. In this demo, what I'm going to do is I have a function. This is pre-baked cooking show style. And in this demo, the function is already deployed and invoked. What I'm going to do is show the automation piece. In this, we will provision an OCI instance. When this instance comes up, it's going to invoke the function, and this function is actually going to create a new object storage bucket in OCI. And when the instance, this bucket can be used for things like putting the logs for applications running on that OCI instance. And when you terminate that instance, the function is going to get invoked again, and it's then going to delete the object storage bucket that was created. Just an example that highlights the automation piece. So let's look at some of those components. I've logged into my OCI console. Let me first show you that I'll be working in the compartment called FN demo. I just have one bucket in it used for something else, but there is just this single bucket. So let me start by actually launching an instance. You see that I have the compartment set up. I don't have any running instances in here. I have a few that are already terminated. But for the purpose of this demo, let me call this as instance-fn demo. Uh, and this, I don't really care about much of the configuration details. In fact, I don't even need to, because I'm going to terminate this instance as soon as it comes up. I don't even need to add SSH key, etc. But what essentially I did is I launched an instance. When I launched the instance, this was actually launched in a VCN that I had already created with the subnet where I want the functions to run. All right. So let's see what happens. So I have this instance. Now let me actually open new tabs. This is my object store bucket. Again, there is only one bucket. And finally, I want to, let's see at how the function service itself is configured. Under developer services, we have the functions console. On functions console, you see that I have a application. In the last video, I showed how to create a new application, etc. But this is the application I already have in place. It has a function called demo function. This function shows some metrics. There is nothing that happened recently. These are all old events, but these are the 4 different type of metrics that you can monitor using the console. So when the function itself is invoked, you would see an invocation. You would see another data point show up here, and when the function executes, then the duration thing comes in. Hopefully we don't see any throttles or errors. But let's see what happened to my instance. All right, looks like the instance just came up, or it's coming up. Hopefully if all goes well, we would see the function getting invoked. All right, so I just saw this function was invoked, and this shows in millisecond the duration. Now let's go back to this bucket, and you will see that the instance-fn demo bucket was just created because the function had made the API call to create this bucket. Let me just terminate this instance, and when this instance termination event finishes, we would then have the object storage bucket would get deleted. Let me summarize this part right now while this action is taking place. But essentially what we discussed here is some of the use cases that are good for the Oracle Function Service. It's a key part of the automation story, especially in a distributed kind of setup in which you have multiple systems all trying to coordinate. This can act as a good glue service kind of thing. An event in one part of the system, and this system could be any infrastructure platform or software as a service kind of service across one or multiple providers. This function, an event can invoke a function, and that function can do some processing or cause a response to happen in the second part of the system. You can do batch kind of workloads using functions. The notion there is you can trigger the function using the HTTPS endpoint at a specific time during the day, and you can carry out your batch processing things using this function, and you only pay for the duration that the function is running. You don't have to have your virtual machine or bare metal machine running at all times. So for batch processing, it's a good use case. You can use it to automate a lot of the actions, like setting up your instance when it comes up. The ATP instance example we had. We can also do uh, checking for security automatically when a developer in your tenancy launches something. You can make sure that it complies with your security posture. That's just another example. You can do things like automated file processing. Some image getting loaded into an OCI object storage bucket can invoke an event and subsequently a function that can work on that can process that image, create a thumbnail, etc. You could do video processing, etc. with it. Uh, all right, so while we were summarizing, we see that this bucket has now been deleted because the instance was terminated. And if we refresh it, we would see that the function was invoked the second time when the instance was terminated. Let me wrap this up, and I would actually record another part in which I am going to show you step by step on how do you set up your development environment for the Oracle Function Service. Thanks.